So we have with us in the studio today Mr. Barry Gardiner. There's an interesting history behind who he is and why we feel an affinity towards him. He has been the chairman of Labour Friends of India, and as we are strong believers in what's happening at the moment in India, I would like to put some pertinent questions to Barry today. So welcome, Barry.
Thank you very much. Always good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Here at MATV, we believe that we are the voice of the community.
Yeah.
And as you know, at the moment, things have been going on which have caused us concern. Members of the public have reached out to us, and we felt that, you know what, we should reach out to the Labour Party and have them come over and talk to us. Tell us, first of all, I'll bring the first point that was our concern. 15th of August, India's Independence Day. A lot happened outside the High Commission. What have you heard about it and what has been done about it? Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, look, when it took place, I was actually on holiday in the far north of Scotland. I was taking time away with my wife, and the beauty of that holiday was that there were no phones, no phone masts, no Wi-Fi, and I was right on the north coast with my binoculars looking at birds. And of course, when I got back into circulation, suddenly my phone started going and people were telling me about the appalling scenes that had taken place on the 15th of August. I saw some of the video footage that had taken place, some of the photographs. And of course, what I did was I had a meeting with a number of my constituents who had been there and had told me of what they'd endured. And really, I find this appalling. Now, I want to be clear. We live in a society where protest is a good thing. People should be able to protest and tell people about their objections and political beliefs. That's what a free society is all about. But I had constituents there who were effectively kettled in that area, you know, by the Nehru bust, the bust of Nehru, just down in that dip there, were effectively kettled on the one side by protesters and on the other side by protesters. And they were not being provided with adequate protection by the police. They were experiencing not just abuse, verbal abuse, but people were throwing eggs and potatoes and bottles, not empty bottles, but plastic bottles of frozen water. So how they managed to freeze the water and keep it frozen during that period, I don't know, but they had. And so I met with my constituents who had been there, who explained all that had happened to me. And of course, that meant that I was up in arms. I wrote to Cressida Dick as the head of the Metropolitan Police, and I asked her what on earth was going on, and to explain a number of aspects of the events of that day and why they had got so badly out of hand.
You know, it's just not that day. We'll come back to that again.
Yeah, sure.
I'll let you continue. I myself was in the queue to get into to see the president of India, or even when the Prime Minister Modi came at the Westminster House. Yeah. And I was standing there just to get in, just at the entrance, and we had people attacking us, taking our flag, and burning it. And the police was stood there.
This is one of the things that I put in my letter to the Met Police, and that is that given what had happened at Chogam when the Prime Minister was here, I believe that the police should have been much better prepared than they clearly were for the events that took place on the 15th of August.
As I can see, you've written to the Mayor's office.
Yes, indeed.
You've written to the Metropolitan Police. Now, we find that the Mayor obviously is not supportive. And what are your views on that?
No, look, the Mayor has totally condemned what took place. As you know, he is not responsible for any form of permitting.
police.
No, he's not responsible for giving license to any demonstrations. That's not his remit. It's not his role.
Right.
He can't do that. And a number of my constituents, when they came to see me, said, "But look, the mayor's office authorises this." In fact, they don't. So that was just a misapprehension.
Right.
So the mayor's office has no role in doing that. Really, the mayor also has no responsibility for operational policing.
The protection of its people.
Yeah, no, that is the role of the police. The mayoralty and the Mayor of London is the police authority,
Exactly.
but they don't have operational control over the police.
I know. I mean, they have to work together.
They're important distinctions, and I do want to emphasise that, because the mayor has been very clear in his own question and answer sessions that he does with the London Assembly. He's made it clear how he utterly condemns what went on, how he deplores the attacks that were made on the High Commission and on the way in which people were so violently abusive at the time.
I had an 80-year-old lady who was actually a family friend, and I saw that she came to meet you and stuff, but she was stood there and she was terrified for her life. And in a country like the United Kingdom,
it's completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. And you speak of an elderly lady, and of course that's appalling. But an adult has a clear choice as to whether they're going to be there or not, and can make an assessment of
But there was no expectation of this.
Of course not. And well, I don't think that's true, because of course you rightly pointed to what had happened at Chogham before. But actually, the key thing is there were children there.
Yes.
What sort of savagery is it that starts throwing eggs at children?
So that's,
I'm sorry, that is totally unacceptable. And the fact that the police, in their response to me, and I have the response from the Met Police
share
here,
some of the.
They've said that yes, there were projectiles that were thrown. They talk about eggs being thrown. And they said, but it was from so deep in the crowd that they weren't able to make any arrests in relation to that. They did make some arrests. I understand that people are being prosecuted. But the point is, there should have been a stronger control of what was going on, and there wasn't. And that is what I'm seeking to get to the bottom of with the Met Police. I'm afraid I don't believe that the response that they have currently provided me with is adequate.
So you're going to pursue this?
I am certainly going
because
to pursue this. But also, I think what one has to understand here as well is that the authority for demonstrations in London, ultimately the licensing of any protests in London, is a matter for the Home Office and the Home Secretary. And I do feel that actually there is a responsibility that government has been very careful not to intrude on this at the moment, but actually the responsibility here is with the Home Secretary as to what demonstrations are able to take place in London. Now, when they knew of the scale of the demonstration that was taking place, it's my view that the Home Office should have been a lot more proactive in ensuring that it was peacefully conducted. And unfortunately, they were not.
They were not. I mean, there has been the cleaning exercise actually of all the massacre almost that they had at the High Commission has been done by general members of the public, and they did it because for their love of India.
Absolutely.
And talking about the love of India, since the government of India has revoked the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, there has been talk in the circles, especially in the UK political circles, pro and anti. Now, since you've always been a very strong supporter of the Labour Friends of India and most of your constituents are very fond of you because of your affinity towards them.
I hope it's also because they think I do a good job, but
but it's also because you're North and South Wembley, so there is that whole diaspora there. But we want to know, we feel as if there is an anti-India sentiment going on at the moment. within the Labour Party.
Look,
talk to us about that.
well, look, you referenced Article 370 and Article 35A, and the ending of special status in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Constitution is a matter for the Indian Parliament. The status of any state in India is a matter for the Indian Parliament.
Yeah, it's a bilateral.
I would no more expect politicians from the Lok Sabha to come and pontificate, or even to pontificate in India on the status of Scotland or the status of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom.
Correct.
And therefore, for any British politician to assume that they can dictate to another government what their own internal matters are concerning autonomy or secession, completely
yes, but
wrong.
We had Yasmin Qureshi and 8 members of your party write to Boris Johnson talking about their concerns. And what I don't seem to understand is, why is a party taking any stance?
Yeah. Let me be clear. In this country, members of parliament represent their constituents, okay? And the MPs that you're talking about have many constituents whose origin is from Pakistan, and they clearly feel that they were representing their constituents in doing that. Does that mean that that is the position of the Labour Party? No, it is not.
But then,
and
let me finish.
Let me just develop. what
I'm going to come back to.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I do not want to see the politics of the subcontinent imported into UK politics. Of course, there are tensions. You, in your opening remarks, talked about the tensions that exists over Kashmir between India and Pakistan. Goodness knows, there have been 2 wars fought over this. We've had the Kargil incident. We've had all the cross-border insurgency, the attacks on the Lok Sabha, the attacks on in Mumbai, at Gandhinagar. All of those conflicts that have taken place. I don't want to see British citizens divide along those lines.
Yeah, that's exactly our concern.
And that's why I think it behoves all politicians not to ramp up the rhetoric of their constituents, but actually to be sober and judicious in these matters, to understand what the legal position is. And sometimes I feel that some people don't understand what the legal position is.
That's where I'm coming from. What my issue is, and what I feel a huge number of people have an issue with, is if you or Mr. Blackman or Mr. J wanted to write to Boris Johnson regarding his constituents and his position, I get it. But what we have an issue with is there is a cahoot thing happening here where the respected Ms. Qureshi has got together only Pakistani MPs and written to the Prime Minister. That is the issue, and that's where there is a general feeling within the Indian diaspora here now that I think Labour is kind of going pro-Pakistan, anti-India.
Sorry, look, I have to interrupt you there.
Of course.
Labour is not pro or anti, right? This is a complete nonsense. The position of the Labour Party has always been that we understand what the legal position is, we know the history, go right back to partition, and what happened was when Maharaja Hari Singh was deciding whether he would take Kashmir either into India or to Pakistan. At that point, Pakistan invaded what is now regarded as Azad Kashmir. Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And that prompted him to sign the deed of accession to India. The situation in international law, therefore, is very clear.
Is it?
Kashmir is part of India. That was the deed of accession that was signed. Okay, so it's like the deed of the house. However, that's not the situation on the ground for the past 72 years. Azad Kashmir has not operated as part of India, and it's operated as part of Pakistan. Now, all the time since then, there has been the United Nations resolutions.
Right.
And what did those resolutions say? They recognized that there was a conflict here.
Yes.
Both India and Pakistan were claiming territory, and they recognized the conflict. And at that point, they then put through the UN resolutions that said what should happen is that the Pakistan should withdraw from Azad Kashmir.
That's right.
And on that precondition, there would then be a plebiscite held in the whole of Kashmir. Okay? Now, unfortunately, that withdrawal has never taken place. That precondition has never happened, and that plebiscite has never taken place. So we're in a situation now where, in effect, the UN resolutions, history has moved on.
But what we are trying to establish here,
yes, indeed.
I don't want to interrupt you or sort of break your chain of thoughts, but what I would really like to stress and what we want to communicate is Ms. Qureshi could have done it herself. The person B could have done it herself. Why did they gang up together and make it as if it was a Labour thought process?
Sorry, look. It's not as if it was a Labour. This is MPs with similar interests will often work together. So, what is Labour Friends of India? Labour Friends of India is a group of MPs within the Labour Party who want to develop our friendship, our international ties, our understanding, our trade, and to understand more about India's role in the world and the importance of it to the UK. So we work together to do that. Now, of course, there are other MPs with different objectives and different groupings within Parliament that will have different objectives, and they will seek to come together to do that. But you would not criticise Labour Friends of India for promoting ties with India. You would say, well, that's good. That's good that they're working together.
Would it be fair for me to say that today, if you were of a certain religion and you were a part of the Labour Party, you would then support a country just for the sake of it? So what I'm saying to you is, Ms. Qureshi could have taken it on the stance of its factual matter. As you very rightly said, Kashmir is a part of India, right?
If you want to interview Ms. Qureshi,
no, but as a party,
I can't answer for her.
If it was just her, I would not mention it to you. If it was just her, I would not mention it to you. I wanted to very briefly, I mentioned to you before, and I think it's very important that we do talk about the leader of the Labour Party and his tweet.
Let's finish off.
But it's just the flow. Yes, but it's the flow that seems to be happening at the moment, where we feel, members of the public feel that Labour Party from the top. I'm sure you don't think that, but we would like you to express that in your own thoughts. But what we are feeling, that even when Jeremy Corbyn is saying the situation in Kashmir is deeply disturbing, human rights abuses take place. Now, what we are finding that unacceptable. We're finding Ms. Qureshi and the whole bunch of people that are getting together not respecting that this is a bilateral issue. It is between India and Pakistan.
Well, you've had a good long attack here.
I know it.
Well, no, it was. It was an attack. So let me try and respond, okay? Because the point that I was about to make when you launched your attack.
No, it wasn't an attack. It was just a question.
Was that I have, and the Labour Party has always respected the Simla Agreement, which set out that this was an exclusively bilateral matter which had to be resolved between India and Pakistan. And that's one of the reasons that I think it inappropriate that politicians seek to pontificate and interpolate and interpose themselves in these matters. And that's where I've been critical of my colleagues for doing so.
Thank you.
that's the first thing. Now, you've said, you've talked about human rights abuses in Kashmir. Let me...
in reference to the tweet.
Let me be absolutely clear. I am always concerned when there is a news blackout or a media shutdown, and where communications are, blacked out by government. Because I believe that transparency is of the ultimate importance.
Absolutely.
You're a news organisation. You have to feel the same.
Yes.
So you will appreciate that is a cause for concern. But if you want to talk about the human rights abuses in J&K, then let me talk very specifically about them. Because I've been to the refugee camps around Jammu. I've been to the Pandit camps, right? I've seen the effect of the ethnic cleansing that went on in the Kashmir Valley. I've seen the fact that for the past 30 years and more, the world has ignored that ethnic cleansing, and the fact that it was explicitly said to the Kashmiri Pandits that either they converted to Islam, or they would be killed, or they had to leave. I've spoken to the refugees. I've been in the camps. I've seen the conditions that they live in those camps. And so I am well aware of the human rights abuses that have been suffered by people in Jammu and Kashmir. And I think the world needs to take a far, far greater note of it. I'm also well aware of the human rights abuses that go on in other countries, notably next door in Pakistan. And these are deeply troubling matters, and of course it is right that politicians of all parties should always speak out when there is an issue of human rights that are being violated. So yes, I am troubled by the news blackout, and I have said, I've met with the Indian High Commissioner, and I've expressed to her my hope that will be ended as swiftly as possible, and people will be able to see for themselves, full transparency, what is happening in Kashmir. I wish that there was the same sort of transparency elsewhere. There isn't, but I do think that it's always right when there are issues of human rights that politicians should flag them up and should be accountable.
Yes, my concern, or rather what I was bringing to your attention, was actually not the issues in general, but it was the fact that our concerns were that the Labour head, Mr. Corbyn, was talking about the rights of the Kashmiri people, assuming that India's government was not concerned about... No, sorry. Don't. Read exactly what Mr. Corbyn said.
It says here, the situation in Kashmir is deeply disturbing. Human rights abuses taking place are unacceptable. The rights of the Kashmiri people must be respected, and the UN resolutions. So,
do you disagree with anything that was said there?
I disagree with the fact that he needs to say, if he would have said India, he would, rather than saying the rights of Kashmiri people. We don't say English people, or we don't say Welsh people. That's my concern. That's the concern of the public.
No, sorry. Do you disagree with anything that he did say? Don't tell me what you wish he had said. Tell me if you disagree with anything that he did say.
The sentiment that we are trying to change is the fact that Kashmir is an Indian territory. We want...
You're trying to change that?
No. The sentiment that we are trying to convey is that Kashmir's problem is India's problem. It is not a Kashmiri issue, it's an Indian issue. What the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has been trying to do is, with the revocation, is to say that it's Kashmir, it's India.
Can I just say, if we're talking about human rights in Kashmir, and there is a difference, that's why the Indian government and the Indian Parliament decided to revoke Article 370. with respect. So you can't say there isn't a Kashmir issue. There is a Kashmir issue. But the point is this, that actually in Kashmir, women's rights were not the same as men's. Right? In Kashmir, there were no rights for gays or transsexual people at all. It was a matter for the Kashmiri government, the Kashmir Assembly, to determine who was a citizen.
Right.
And it was not the situation that anyone in the rest of India could be having the same rights to own land or property in Kashmir, even though you were an Indian citizen. Now, so there were abrogations of human rights that were caused by the situation in Kashmir.
But
okay?
all humbly we're saying is,
my point to you is that these are human rights which the revocation of Article 370 is doing away with those abuses of human rights.
That's right.
And is actually in effect equalizing up the situation for women, for gay people, and indeed for Indian citizens more widely, in terms of their ability to exercise their citizens' rights in Kashmir. So there is an issue of human rights in Kashmir. It needs to be properly understood, and it needs to be properly understood by people who are talking about Article 370 and its revocation, sometimes without really understanding what the situation was, because it cannot be acceptable that a woman should not be able to marry outside of Kashmir, and or if she does, lose her property rights. This is ridiculous.
With you, I mean, absolutely, we are completely supporting the actions of the Prime Minister of India to do away with it, and we appreciate that you have taken so much care and concern to understand what is going on. We just feel that your stance is extremely appealing to the members of your constituency and a lot of the people that are standing by what's happening. But we hope that the Labour Party in entirety sees that and does come across as positive. That's all we're asking for, and understanding.
All I would say to you is, and I challenged you to find any specific phrase in what Jeremy Corbyn had said that you disagreed with. You can't.
My issue was that
what you've done, what you've done is you've suggested that maybe there was a different meaning here. I'm saying if you look at what Jeremy Corbyn said, of course we must respect human rights. None of us disagree with that. Of course we don't want to see violence. None of us want to see that. And if you look again, Jeremy condemned what happened at Pulwama. We have seen the most appalling violence taking place in Kashmir, usually through cross-border incursion. And it's important to understand where the source of that violence has been coming from. And as I said to you, there are people today living in those refugee camps who have the legacy of that violence and have been living with it for the past 30 years.
Yes, they have been. And to the members of the public, and the reason why we are here today and what we are trying to communicate to our community is these issues are India's issues. These issues need to be dealt with, and the government needs time and is doing its best to deal with it. As a nation, Great Britain is far away, and their role should be to support India in their journey. And there should be some positive and negative. But it should feel as if it's pro-India. At the moment, all we're questioning is the anti-India sentiment that we felt. That's all.
Can I just say, it is not for any government to be pro or anti. What we should be doing, right? This should not be we should not be put into this binary situation. What the government in the UK should do is to support any efforts made by India or Pakistan to resolve that issue in a bilateral manner.
I agree with that.
And I am absolutely confident that the Labour Party's position is that we would, in any way we could, we would support those initiatives, wherever they come from, whether they come from Pakistan or from India. It doesn't matter. What we need to see is we need to see that resolution on a bilateral basis. And that you can be absolutely sure the Labour Party would welcome and give any support in any way that it was called on to do.
Okay, there's just one question I have to, in regards to the current tensions within your community and constituency. Do you suggest, or are there any activities or any efforts that we are making to have events which kind of get members of both?
Yeah, look, I think that's really well said, and I would welcome those leaders in the community here reaching out across what is the divide in the subcontinent to the other community. Let us have Mandirs reaching out to the imams. Let's have the imams reaching out to the Mandirs. We do not want the politics of the subcontinent and the divisions of the subcontinent to infect community relations here. And it's really important that politicians don't stoke that. So I would welcome any outreach across, whether it's interfaith or whether it's between India and Pakistani origin citizens here.
Go ahead and...
You know, we need to understand each other better.
Absolutely.
We need to try and listen to the concerns that each have. We need to try and take on board the fears that communities have. You know, there are loved ones on both sides of that line of control. And the important thing for everyone is that, I mean, just look at the number of lives that have been lost. I talked about the bandits. We've had, what is it, over 100,000 people were forcibly evicted. The Kashmir government said that it was less than, I can't remember whether it's three, I think it was 4,500, less than 4,500 people that remained, the Pandits that remained in the valley. And in one 5-year period alone, 219 of them were murdered. Now, they were murdered very often, of course, by cross-border insurrection.
Absolutely.
But, you know, these are lives that are being lost. And these are families that are being destroyed. And we need an end to it. Now, it's not for British politicians to dictate what that should be.
Perfect.
It's not for us to dictate what that should be. But any support that we can give to those governments, yes, let's give it. And in the meantime, let's try and do all we can to resolve the fears and the tensions that exist in our communities up and down Britain.
That is
so that we can engage with each other, and instead of, you know, throwing verbal rocks at each other, let's actually come together and try and create an atmosphere of understanding. Because, you know, the communities, the non-resident Indians here who are citizens of this country, the Indian community here has so much at risk, from what's going on.
Yes, I mean,
as indeed the Pakistani community have, and what they mustn't do is stoke up those tensions, and what happened on the 15th of August certainly did, and that was appalling. You know, one of the questions I've asked is, how was it that all those coaches managed to block the Embankment, the Aldwych and the Strand? What planning was there for where those coaches were going to go? How, you know, it was effectively a roadblock in our capital. Who organised, and it was organised, who organised that violence? How was it that somebody took, you know, not just a ceremonial kirpan, but actually an offensive weapon that was long more than 6 inches to that demonstration and was brandishing it in front of police? these are the things that we have to get to the bottom of, because somebody organised that demonstration.
And that's what concerns us.
And that needs to be dealt with, because if individuals or indeed, foreign governments are doing that, that is organising unrest on the streets of Britain, and we must not and cannot have that.
I'll tell you this, for instance, I have children, and we are planning to go to India Divas in September.
Okay.
And my husband said, the first thing he said to me is, do you think it's safe? Because, something could happen there, like the 15th of August, and do you really want to? And that's what we want to allay fears and say, in London, in the United Kingdom, both parties, whether it's Labour, whether it's Tory, and you have very rightly said, must stand together for both communities, and we have to work towards making Indians feel safe, and any negative actions done by other parties or members of different countries, we must have a certain plan.
We have a responsibility to Britain's citizens. It doesn't matter what faith those citizens are, it doesn't matter what colour those citizens are, it doesn't matter what ethnic origin or national background those citizens come from. They are British citizens. They have all the rights of British citizens. That means that my constituents have the right to go and celebrate Indian Independence Day in peace at the Aldwych with the High Commission. It means that, yes, other people will have the right to have peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
But it's peaceful. It has to be peaceful. What was unacceptable about the 15th of August was it was not peaceful, it was violent, and some of that violence, as you rightly said, was addressed not only to elderly women and men, but also against children. That cannot, should not, and must not happen in the UK.
Okay. I think on that note, I want to ask you one final question on this matter. Going forward, in a positive light, in the right way, if you have thought of any steps that, the future Indian events that take place in terms of security and suggestions, will you be sending them forward to the Conservative government and, to the members of the public, instructions on how to keep your constituents safe, any suggestions to avoid any future unrest?
Look, it's not my job to dictate to the police. Operational policing is a matter for the Commissioner, and she must direct her police force as she sees fit to maintain public order. Now, my concern is that public order broke down on that day. The letter that I have here from the Assistant Commissioner suggests that public order did not break down.
Is that what they're saying?
Yes, they said there was no breach of public order. If I can
Please share us some of your thoughts.
The Deputy Assistant Commissioner said, I do not accept that public order broke down, but do understand the perspective of your constituents. Well, I believe that's inaccurate. Quite simply, I think public order did break down. If you have people throwing projectiles at children and the police are unable to stop them or to apprehend them, then I see that as a breakdown in public order. What he says is, I have directed a more robust stance with groups intending to protest at the IHC in order to mitigate the disruption they might cause both to those in the IHC and the environs and the wider community in the future. So I think they have taken on board the extent of the disruptive violence that took place on that day, and they are now going to use that to ensure that further demonstrations are not able to happen in the way that this did. My question to them, though, of course, was, given what had already happened at Chogham the previous year, why had they not already put those measures in place? And that is still unanswered. But I will be going back to the Assistant Commissioner and pursuing these matters with him, quite simply because, my constituents have a right to go about their lawful business without fear, without let or hindrance, and certainly without intimidatory violence such as they experienced on that day.
Absolutely. On that note, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for your concern and your actions to actually support the constituents in going about their daily business without fear.
I hope that what you'll do is you will also seek to interview the Home Secretary. Priti Patel is the new Home Secretary. And given that it is the Home Office and the Home Secretary that authorises such demonstrations in the capital, then I hope that you will take these matters up with her and that you will receive a very clear response from her
for any future events.
For any future events that are planned. Not only that there will be conditions attached to the organisers of those events, but that there will be adequate policing in place right from the beginning to ensure the safety of the British public.
That is absolutely the case, and we feel that there will be some guidelines that we need to put up to ensure the public knows what to do and how to go about it if there is any other issues happening. But I hope that things will be more safer. We are in the United Kingdom, and thank you again for being here today. We've asked some tough questions today. A lot of the questions have been answered. Mr. Barry Gardiner here today has been open, honest and transparent in his answers. A lot of your fears will be allayed, and we hope that you can go about your daily business feeling safe and secure here in the United Kingdom. Thank you for watching us. Good evening.